The first step of the Creative Eyes process is to set high quality targets. You have to make sure they're not too big, you're not trying to boil the ocean and extract gold. You have to make sure that they're not too small, you're just tweaking the dial. They have to be just right in order to achieve this. To set a high quality target, we're going to have to get in an innovation mindset. And to do that, we're going to have to use all of our faculties. We're going to have to draw things and talk to people and make revisions. We're going to have this sense of destiny when we do this. To get into an innovation mindset, we have to watch the weather. We don't control the weather. The weather happens to us. So we have to pay attention to what's going on in the world around us, and we have to anticipate those forces to take advantage of them. When I was a boy growing up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, we lived very close to Lake Michigan, and it changed the weather very quickly. So what I learned was it could be very warm in the morning, and by noon it could be raining, and by the evening it could be snowing. Now, we could decide to take an umbrella or change our clothes or dance naked in the rain, but the point was we couldn't change the weather. You had to pay attention to the weather. And the same is true for organizations. Things happen in the larger world. There are conflicts and diseases and economic upheavals, and there are labor shortages, and there are all kinds of new technologies that are constantly emerging. You have to pay attention to these, and these normally fall outside of what strategists look at, but the irony is these are things that constantly happen and must be incorporated and integrated into your high quality target. So how do we practice prismatic thinking when watching the weather? Well, you take the 4 points of view to make sure that we overcome our strategic blind spots. So you take the green create point of view to spot trends in emerging technologies. You take the red control point of view so you see standards and regulations. You take the blue compete point of view so you see competitors and opportunities to make money. And you take the yellow point of view, the collaborate point of view, so you can see what customers want and what your own people want. When creating a high quality target, we have to remember that we're going to make revisions as we learn new things and go along the way. So it's going to be iterative. We have to build our target to make adjustments. But at any given time, the target has to be clear. So we need targets that are very specific, things that we can measure, things that we can look at, things that people in common can see. It needs to be feasible. Now that doesn't mean it's easy, but it needs to be possible. So the object is not to overplay our hand or not to make it too incremental. We've got to be somewhere in between there. But most importantly, it has to be wow. It has to be something that's really, really worth doing, that creates a sense of inspiration and a sense of aspiration in the organization. When considering the drivers of your high quality target, the impact and probability are the two most important aspects. If something has a high probability of happening, which is the most important thing to consider, and also has high impact, you should plan on doing it. If it's only moderate probability and moderate impact, you should watch it. Keep an eye on it. But here's the part that most people miss. If it's got a low probability or low impact, you should forget about it. So it should be at least a third of all the drivers that you consider that are possible should be removed. Roughly a third of those things that you think are possible should be things you keep an eye on, but no more than 1/3 of the things that you think are possible are things that you should incorporate into your high quality target. So let me give you an example of probability and impact, and it has to do with the size of technology. When I started in my field, I worked on a supercomputer that was roughly the size of a football field. As time went on, that supercomputer became the size of a microcomputer. As time went on, it became the size of a smartphone. Now, if we were to look forward and say what's going to happen with technology, it's pretty safe to assume it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Perhaps it will be integrated into our clothes, into our glasses, into everyday things, what they call the Internet of Things. So with some certainty, we could say that technology is going to become smaller because the impact of that is going to be relatively high on a lot of fields, and the probability is relatively high. One of the biggest challenges to creating a high quality target is when teams get stuck in the planning cycle. You know, the report about the report, the meeting about the meeting. What happens is these teams start gathering excessive data and they're not running any experiments or gaining any real information about reality. They get stuck. So it's far better to have an imperfect target that everybody understands, that pulls them forward, because as you gain new information from your experience and your experiments, you can make adjustments. You can make mid-course corrections. You can right your ship. So it's much more important to get momentum on a shared vision than it is to have that vision become perfect. A great example of how to create a high-quality target by incorporating what you learn as you go along is the way venture capitalists invest in new technologies. Let's use the biotech sector as an example. We might have a disease state that we're trying to create a cure for. So what we do is we invest in a dozen companies that have different therapies, different approaches to solve that disease state. So what happens is I give everybody a little bit of money for these very different approaches. This is sometimes called angel investing. And very quickly I accelerate the failure cycle, and most of those companies prove to be unsuccessful. A few companies make it through and they get a little more money. This is what we call the mezzanine state. And in the end, it turns out that one of the companies has the answer, and that's the company that I'm going to put all the money in. Now you see, the way I've made all my money is I've gotten momentum moving forward by running lots of little tests to figure out what really works and what doesn't really work, and I have planned for this cycle in my high quality targets. So in the end, I have the best solution based on real experience and real experiments. So once we have our high impact and high probability targets, you want to ride what moves like a surfer. You want to consider these things that are going to happen that can carry your initiative forward. These are the kind of forces that are going to help your innovation initiative work successfully. So there are some great examples of writing what moves, and that is anticipating the trend. And you can see this most clearly in things like the fashion industry and the automobile industry. In both of these industries, it's very important to get on trend, to get the color right, to get the fashion right, to get the design right. So the fashion industry holds shows, early shows for the people who are early adapters of fashion, critics, the art houses, the people who buy fashion, those high-end department stores. And so what we see is what colors are possible for next season, what designs are possible, and we get feedback in real time so that when those clothing lines come to market, we actually know what those trends are going to be, and we're on trend. The same is true with automobile shows. We have concept cars that we make, and this is the idea of trying to show what that car might look like. Again, from these lead adapters, we get feedback, so by the time the consumer gets a car, they get the car that's in the right color, that's in the right styling. We have anticipated where things are going. We have ridden what moves. When you're developing your high-quality targets, you should ask your team 3 questions. First, is this real? Second, can we win at it? And finally, is this worth doing? Think around the 4 perspectives when you answer these questions. As you're developing your high-quality target, develop an innovator's mindset by having a sense of destiny, by challenging convention, by looking at the white spaces where people normally don't look for opportunities. Most important, remember that developing a high-quality target means that we devise our strategy with revisionary eyes. What do I mean by devise with revisionary eyes? Well, for most of us, when we make a plan, we try and stick to it because that plan is used to focus and align us. But what happens when the future presents us with unknown opportunities and unsuspected barriers? We have to make revisions. We have to go around. We have to navigate. And the key is when you make a plan, you have to make a plan with the idea in mind that you're going to make adjustments. You're constantly going to make adjustments to that plan. So when you make a plan, it can't be written in stone. It has to be written so that it can be easily changed. And everyone who follows the plan needs to know that the plan changes as we gain new information. Now, here's the great difficulty in this. Most of the time when people change their mind, they're accused of being flip-floppers. But the truth is, changing your mind is the sign of intelligence. When you get new information, when you see new opportunities or encounter barriers that were unforeseen, you should change your mind and take another course. And you should count on this happening when you build your strategy in the first place. Developing high-quality targets is a cycle. We're going to make adjustments as we go along and learn new information. So let's practice some prismatic thinking. What is our high-quality target? Why? What are our unique opportunities? What are our constraints? How do we capitalize on these opportunities? How do we overcome these constraints? The second step of the Creative Eyes process is to enlist deep and diverse domain experts. Innovation isn't an